One.
Good evening and welcome to the December 14th, 2020 meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. My name is Catherine Halpern. I'm Chair of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. This meeting is being conducted by remote participation only, and I'll be reading a few points about that in just a moment. The meeting is also being broadcast live on Channel 18 and will also be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing. And I have a few points about our remote procedure. First, I should ask if anyone is recording the meeting. It's all right to record the meeting, but you do need to notify us. So, regarding our remote participation, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A 18, and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. That's 1-508-945-4410. And the conference ID number is 979-625-556#. That's 979-625-556#. Or you may also join the meeting online using Microsoft Teams through the link that is in the agenda that's posted on the Planning Board page on the town website. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and as mentioned, a recording will be posted of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In the event that anyone becomes inadvertently muted, please press *6 on your phone. And also, I'd just like to ask everyone who's not speaking that you mute your phones or your computer microphones, and also if you would disable the video on your computer. So here's a few procedural steps I'll go through for our remote participation. We'll start off with a roll call of all planning board members to make sure everyone's present. When you are recognized by the chair for members of the public, non-board members participating in the call, please restate your name, and if you're joined by telephone, restate the last 4 digits of your phone number for identification purposes. We just need to always be able to identify who's speaking. Also, after an agenda item has been discussed by the public body, I will request that any members of the public or non-board members who would like to make any comments or who have questions, I will request that they will do so. When you're recognized by the chair, please turn on your mic and then repeat your name and the last 4 digits of your phone number, and then please go ahead and speak. The planning board will be taking all votes tonight by roll call vote. And then again, at the end of the meeting, we'll close the meeting with a verbal confirmation of the time of adjournment. So those are just a few points. So let's begin with the roll call of the planning board members. And may I ask Art Sprue, can you confirm you're present?
Art Sprue, present.
Thank you. Warren Chain?
This is Warren Chain, present.
Thank you. Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus, here.
Bob Wirtschafter?
Bob Wirtschafter here.
Roger Griffin?
Roger Griffin here.
And I'm Catherine Halpern. I'm also here. Tom Gagan will not be able to join us tonight. Before we move on to the first agenda item, I'm just going to ask if any of the board members need to recuse themselves from anything on tonight's agenda. All right, so let's go ahead. The first item is the minutes from our November 23rd, 2020 meeting. I'll go through the board to see if you have any changes or additions to the November 23rd minutes. Art Spru.
Art Spru, no changes, no additions to the minutes.
Thank you. Warren Chain. Warren Chain, you might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
That's the Warren Chain. No comments, no changes.
thank you. Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus is all set.
All right, Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, no changes.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, no changes, no comment.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is Catherine Halpern. I also had no changes or amendments. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 23rd meeting?
Art Spru, I'll make that motion.
Bob Wirtschafter, second.
Thank you. So we'll do a roll call vote. Art Spru.
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus approved.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, approved.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve the minutes from November 23rd. The next item on our agenda is, it's been requested that we make a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals regarding 68 Shell Drive. And I believe Bill Riley should be here to present this matter to the board.
Catherine, this is Allie. I don't see him on yet.
Yes.
Do you think it would be okay if we switched some of the agenda items around just so we can wait for him?
Sure, we could do that. So the item after the recommendation to Zoning Board of Appeals is discussion regarding the Planning Board representative to the Community Preservation Committee. So just to sum up, at the moment, Arthur Spru is the Planning Board's representative to the Community Preservation Committee, but the Board of Selectmen reminded us that Arthur's 3-year term has passed. So we need, the Planning Board needs to again recommend to the Board of Selectmen who we would like to be the community, the representative from the Planning Board to the Community Preservation Committee. And first, I'd like to mention that, Arthur, if you'd like to continue, we can recommend you again. We can do that. If you would like to continue, we can also consider other volunteers. So maybe, Arthur, I'll ask you first, what would you like to do?
Hi, Catherine. Okay, so I think this had to do with my expiration because I was just reappointed again for another 3-year term in June of this year, correct?
Right, correct,
Okay.
yes.
So we got to
correct.
go through the process again. To begin with, I have no problem participating again. However, I just want to go over some concerns associated with some conflicts.
All right.
Michael, the past chair, he sent out a notice saying that he wants to do the meetings at 4 o'clock on Mondays. Now, if we have a 5 o'clock planning board meeting, often our discussions with CPC will go beyond an hour, and because it's a fairly large group. It's like, I think 9 of us. And I'm a little bit concerned that this is an inconsistent time or in conflict with our meetings. I sent a note on this several times out to Michael, but I haven't heard one way or other back from him. No, so whether it's me that is appointed for this or the other board members, I think there will be a conflict though,
Right.
if they hold it at 4 o'clock. So that's my only question of concern. If the board has no problem with me continuing with this role, I'm okay with that.
All right. Thank you, Arthur. Um, so what I might ask, Ally, is there a way that you can step in on planning board's behalf and see if we can work out um, a better schedule that works with?
Yep, Catherine, this is Sally. I have no problem with asking the liaison to the CPC if they could reconsider the timing, just because it obviously conflicts with ours.
All right, that's great. Now, do they meet they don't meet every Monday a month, so it might be possible that they
Well,
meet on an alternate Monday?
well, that's true. There's no set schedule, Catherine, but
Oh, okay.
they do have a heavy agenda on both the months of January and February.
Okay.
And it's almost every week.
All right. All right, great. That's good to know. Thank you, Arthur. All right, so Ally will help us address that scheduling problem. And then I'm just going to go through and ask the board if there's any discussion. So Arthur, we've heard from you that you'd be happy to continue. Warren, any discussion? Any comments?
No comments really, other than to say I think Art is a very good candidate to represent the interest of the planning board. So I would enthusiastically support it if he's willing to do it.
Thank you so much, Warren. And Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus here. I think he's doing a great job, and I unfortunately, it bothers me that they're trying to hone in on our Mondays, but it's a worthwhile thing. And even if he had to leave early on a couple of meetings, it's still a worthwhile thing. And I've been there, done it, and I think it's a good job. And thank you very much, Hat.
Thank you, Bob. And Bob Wirtschafter.
I have nothing more to say that hasn't already been said.
Okay, and Roger Griffin.
Yeah, same thing, no comments, but thank you, Art.
Okay, and Catherine, this is Catherine, and also thank you, Arthur. And with that, I would ask for a motion from the board to recommend that Arthur Sprue continue as our representative to the Community Preservation Committee.
This is Bob Dubus, and I'll make that motion.
May I have a second?
Roger Griffin will second that.
All right, let's go through a roll call vote. Arthur, you're perfectly welcome to vote for yourself if you
Yeah, I
like.
can't abstain.
You can abstain as well
no.
if you prefer.
No,
Yeah.
I'll vote for approval of that.
All right, Warren Shane.
Warren Chain, I vote to approve.
Bob Dubus.
I vote to approve.
Bob Wirtschafter.
I approve.
And Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, vote to approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also vote to approve that we recommend Arthur Sprue for another term to be the planning board's representative to the Community Preservation Committee. All
Catherine,
right.
this is Art Sprue. Can I
Yes.
just ask one clarification?
Yes,
The
absolutely.
term is for what duration?
I understand it's 3 years. Ally, do you want to
Yep,
clarify?
I can answer. So I talked to the town manager's office today to confirm the duration, and it is for the length of time that you are appointed to the planning board. Unless for some reason, you no longer want to serve on CPC, then, we could make a change. But the duration is for as long as you are appointed on planning board. So I think you're up in 2023 again. So at that point, we'll have to make another recommendation.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ally. Thank you, Arthur. So we still, are you seeing Ally? Has Bill Riley joined us?
I do not see him here, and I just sent him an email asking if he had problems signing on. So I'm not sure if you want to do the other quick update on the agenda, and then if for some reason he does not sign on, I can just explain to the board what they're proposing to do.
All right, that sounds great. So the other item on our agenda is the long-range planning update, and this is actually a very brief update. As you know, the Cape Cod Commission has taken all of the information from the survey regarding form-based code and all of the feedback from planning board members and any other information, and they are working on incorporating all of that into the draft bylaw for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning. And what they're doing essentially is adding an in-depth piece using form-based code to the basis that the planning board also put together when we were previously working on the zoning bylaw for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. So Ally and I had been hoping that the Cape Cod Commission would be joining us even in tonight's meeting or at our first meeting in January. However, it looks like at this point they'll be able to join us either January 25th or February 8th to present the draft bylaw for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning. At that time also, we've received some correspondence from the community and we'll review any additional input and the board will have an opportunity to review in depth the draft that Cape Cod Commission has prepared using form-based code. So that's really the update. I will ask the board, since we have a little time, I'll go through and just see if there's any questions or comments regarding that. So Arthur Sprue?
Art Sprue, I don't have any questions or comments at this point.
Okay, Warren Chain.
Well, okay, I have no questions or comments, but I'm looking forward to it.
Good, thank you. Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus is all right with the way it is right at the moment.
Okay, Bob Wertschafter.
No comments right now, thank you.
Okay, Roger Griffin. Roger, are you on mute? Yeah, there you
So
go.
I'm sorry. I'm getting used to my tablet. I didn't know where I was at this point. No questions or comments.
All right, great. And also, I think it's pretty straightforward. I also am looking forward to hearing from Cape Cod Commission. So, Ally, I don't see that Bill Riley has joined. Do you want to quickly review what's the story is regarding our recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals for 68 Shell Drive?
Sure.
Madam Chairman, wait a minute, Madam Chairman, can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes, you may,
Thank
Bob
you. This
Dubus.
is a question for Ally. Ally, this has to do with the driveway and only the driveway?
That is correct, yes. We review it under our Conservancy District bylaw for if there's a driveway that's being expanded or changed that's in a Conservancy District. And we give a recommendation to the ZBA. So yeah, technically we're only supposed to be looking at the driveway portion.
Okay, I'm familiar with that area, and I was down there, and for my 2 cents worth to maybe help out a little bit, is I see the driveway being moved back up the hill, and I know it's still in the Conservancy District, but it is further away from the original driveway, and I don't see any problems or any hesitation in giving this a positive review. Thank you.
Okay,
Good afternoon, good evening, Bill Riley. I apologize for being late. I'm still
okay.
not very confident when it comes to these kind of things, so I apologize.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Riley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I represent Joe Giacalone, whose project this is, and the principal goal here, from the town's point of view, is the fact that the oldest house in Chatham, at least the most significant portion of it, is going to be saved and moved up. Alec, can you point that out? There you go, right there. The driveway, I believe, although I don't have Dave Clark with me, but as far as I know, it's going to be either gravel or shell. I don't believe it's proposed as asphalt. I don't have it in front of me, so
Bill, this is Ally. I did speak to Dave Clark about that, and he indicated that it would be shell.
Right, that's what my understanding was as well. So it seems to me that whether it's in the floodplain or not, we hope to get permission to elevate it. I don't think the driveway is going to do anything to interfere with the passage of water, one way or the other. and as far as we know, it's really never been flooded, so that would be our presentation.
All right, thank you, Bill. This is Catherine. Ali, I may ask you to fill in a few points, but I'd like to just add a couple of points. The driveway is also being expanded, and that is something that the planning board does need to look at. The current driveway, as Ali points out in her staff report, is at 3,491 square feet, and the proposed driveway area would be 7,700 square feet. So that's quite a significant increase in the driveway area. And I think Ali is screen sharing, and you see right now that she's pointing to the aerial view of the property as is, and you can
Yep.
see the current driveway. And then we can compare that to the proposed driveway, and there is quite a bit of expansion. And as Ali notes in her, again, in her staff report, she notes as set forth in section 4A3D of the Chatham Protective Bylaw, the construction and maintenance of a driveway or roadway of minimum legal and practical width where no alternative means of access from an established way is available is allowed by special permit in the Conservancy District. But the wording does say minimum legal and practical width. Also, we do need to look at the unobstructed flow of water, and we do need to look at the fact that the driveway is of pervious material, which Ali has confirmed. There is another issue, and I may call on Ali to provide a bit more details, and it does affect the construction of the driveway, and Mr. Riley mentioned it, that they do intend to raise up the area of the driveway. The Conservancy District and the floodplain are contiguous, and the floodplain protective bylaw does apply here. And in this case, fill is not allowed. So I just wanted to express the concern about the raising up of the new driveway.
Well, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Riley.
Thank you. The wording in bylaws is somewhat infelicitous, as the courts have said, because each separate bylaw has comes out of a different thought process, and rarely is a zoning bylaw a coherent whole. If you know what I mean? And so, in the floodplain district bylaw, there's a section that allows the placement of landscape material, not fill, but landscape material, up to 2 feet in depth along the foundation, tapering out to 10 feet away from the foundation.
Yes.
Okay, so we have requested a variance from the zoning board because those are dimensional issues as opposed to use issues, which can be varied if the zoning board finds that there are grounds for a variance, which is very rare. So we've requested a variance from those dimensional requirements that would allow us to bring in, instead of 2 feet, 3.5 feet along the foundation, and then we would taper it out to 90 feet to match the grade. And so it could be that that's a reach that won't be achieved, but so in other words, we understand the question of fill. We don't use the word fill. We use the phrases in the bylaw itself, in the floodplain district. And we've been working with the Woods Hole Group to do an analysis of this property relative to other properties. And this property is in something of a bowl. And so...
exactly.
Yeah, so we have this, 15 or 20 page report from Woods Hole Group, which is part of our filing with the zoning board, explaining why placing this landscape material, never to use the word fill, is not harmful to either any of the adjoining properties, in terms of floodwaters. So that's sort of where we are on that aspect. So
Okay.
we never say fill.
Yes, you don't say fill, but it is in fact fill.
Well,
And if I could just,
it could be landscape material too.
Mr. Riley, if I could speak for a moment, having worked on the drafting of the floodplain bylaw for the town of Chatham quite extensively, I'm familiar with this particular passage and why it was included in the bylaw. What I'm referring to here is material that will be under, from what we can see on the current topo versus the topo that are outlined for the plan for the new driveway. It does appear that there will be fill underneath the new driveway. In other words, the new driveway will be raised up because it is true, as you say, that this property exists in a bowl. Now, the driveway is under the purview of the planning board, and the planning board does need to consider that, therefore, in their consideration of the propriety of this driveway. The passage about the landscape material that we can have Ally cite, if necessary, was included in the floodplain bylaw with a very specific purpose and a very limited application. And that purpose was in the event that people needed to raise up their houses because their structure was in the floodplain, that what happens, and I think Bob Wirtschafter was involved in this and he'll remember too, what happens is that there can be basement level exposure above ground because the basements have to have the ability for the flood water to flow through them. So in order to allow for some aesthetic reparation of that situation, landscape material is allowed just against that basement area, to the distance, as specified in the bylaw, just to provide some aesthetic reparation of that situation where the basement is showing. The landscape material is not intended to go underneath driveways to lift them up. And as I see it, that would not be a correct application of that particular passage of that particular section of the floodplain bylaw. So I just want the board to be aware of this. And Ally, if you can add some points that might make that more clear or cite the passage, that could be helpful. But it is something that we do need to consider when we're considering the driveway. Go ahead, Ally.
Okay, do you want me to read that section in the floodplain?
Sure, go ahead. I think we should just be clear about what its intention and application is.
So landscape material up to 2 feet in depth at the foundation and taper to meet grade within 10 feet of the foundation shall not be calculated towards the grade plane and shall not be considered fill as regulated in section IV A4 of this bylaw. And then do you want me to go to that section to read it?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Just to make it more clear.
Sure. Okay, so then I'm going to that next section. This is in the Conservancy District. It says, no person shall fill, place, or dump in the Conservancy District any soil, loam, peat, sand, gravel, rock, or other material, substance, refuse, trash, rubbish, debris, or dredged material, except with the exception of landscaping material as allowed under section IV B4 of this bylaw, which is what I just read to the board.
Okay, thank you, Ally. So let's go through the board members and see if you have comments or questions for Mr. Riley. So Art Sprue.
Art Sprue. Well, I have many comments. I think more observations than than anything. That should be a flag for us. And outside of the one for the driveway, which falls underneath our purview of recommendations, I think it's important that the board understand what is being proposed here as part of this plan. Because when I took a look at it and I drove out there and looked at the site, it wasn't just a fill on the driveway that was significant. It's along the entire perimeter of the site, including along the shoreline there. Extensive fill would be put in place for the septic system. There's going to be a wall there, and unless they fill right up to the property line a whole foot, you're talking about a wall exposed to 4 feet for the septic system. They'll be filled for where they're going to relocate the house. There's a lot of vegetation that'll be removed as part of this. It's certainly not in light of what, the bylaws say. And one of my concerns associated with that is when I read the beginning of the purpose of the floodplain district, it says it's to preserve the natural flood control characteristic and the flood storage capacity of the floodplain, and to maintain a groundwater table and water recharge. The site, the way they're proposing it, doesn't achieve that. As a matter of fact, it pretty much ignores that. And it's certainly not good practice in an AE zone. This is a flood zone. So it's unusual because we normally don't see a property in front of us that is completely within the AE zone. Usually there's just a section of it, there's upland areas. This one's completely in the AE zone. I think there needs to be some precautions that the town takes to make sure that this doesn't excavate and remove vegetation and do many feet of filling of material here, because that's what is being proposed in here. Now, I understand that's outside of our purview from a standpoint of our recommendations. My point is, I don't see any harm in us making a statement that it's inconsistent with what the bylaw says, and just to flag it in our statement back to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, that's just my opinion. I have to defer to whether the other board members think associated with this. I mean, I take a look at some of the other conditions that are in the floodplain district, and they're very cautious and careful about what goes on in the AE zone. Construction materials and excavated materials, you can't stockpile them within it. You got to remove them from the site. That's done purposely so that you're not harming the area of the zone. There's other things too associated with erosion protection control that they're flagging. I just think that we have to be very careful about what we as a town do associated with this, and I don't see any harm in us flagging some other concerns and identifiers that at least I observed with as much fill as they're proposing to put in this. It doesn't mean that they can't build a house there. They have a top of floor elevation of 13.5. They have a top of foundation of 12.5. That's fine. And what you had quoted, Catherine, you and Ally, where you would put a few feet of fill right up against the foundation and 10 feet out, you meet the existing grade, perfectly fine. So there's no restriction in building the house here unless there's some other dimensional concerns associated with this. I think the rest of the site, though, would be harmed by what is being proposed here. But again, I'll defer to the rest of the board members. If they only want to talk about the driveway, then focus on the driveway. And the driveway says you should be building at that grade, and I don't see any reason why you can't do that. I drove there. I didn't have any problem driving on that grade where it was, and I'm not sure there was a need to fill it another 2-3 feet for the driveway. The only reason why they're doing it is because they're filling it for other purposes. So that's about all I have at this point, Catherine.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. So I'll ask Warren Chain for comments, discussion, or questions.
This is Warren Chain. I pretty much go along with all the comments made previously, but do have a question for the counselor as to why the size of the proposed new driveway is literally twice as big as the old driveway. What is it that requires that, given the wording of the bylaw, which talks about the minimum legal width, minimum legal and practical width is permitted by special permit. There doesn't seem to be any even passing recognition of trying to minimize it. It seems quite the opposite, but there may be a reason, and I'm looking for that.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, please go ahead and answer Warren's question, Mr. Riley.
I think well, in the broader context of the comments previously, as well as, Mrs. Chain's, echoing of them, philosophically, I think that the thought process created the existing bylaw is a little bit on the way back zone. Like, in other words, there's an acknowledgement by everyone that Chatham as a town is confronted with rising sea level. And so there's two ways of dealing with rising sea level. One is to start tearing down the waterfront homes and moving everything back. All that would do is destroy millions and millions of dollars worth of value from the property owners of the town of Chatham, as well as the Chatham tax base. The other way to approach it would be to protect those properties and enable them to be elevated out of the floodplain. And so you go, well, what are we protecting by prohibiting fill or landscape material in the floodplain? Well, in Chatham, the floods arise out of storm surges, and this happens to be a wall I've been beating my head against for about 25 years. A storm surge, the height of a storm surge, the amount of the flood, and by the way, did you see the high tides today? But anyway, the amount of that fill or that flood is determined by factors, like atmospheric pressure, how long the storm has been at sea, what the wind direction is from. Those are the things that determine storm surge. And there's nothing we do that can change the elevation of that storm surge. So if the storm surge is going to be 9 feet above high tide, no matter what we do, it's just going to be 9 feet. Doesn't matter if the ground is at elevation 8 or elevation 12. The storm surge is going to be elevation 9. And so the fact that we want to make a change on this property by bringing in landscape material, a euphemism for fill.
Mr. Riley, you are misapplying that term in this case. I must make that clear. Yeah. Yes.
Well, see, here's the problem. You use the bylaw to say you can't bring in fill. Well, then you use the bylaw in another where we're able to ask for a dimensional variance. And that's one of the problems with using a zoning bylaw to deal with conservation and climate change issues. It's awkward, and it's difficult to have a coherent document, because, you try to solve one problem on this side, and you try to prevent something on the other side, but you can't do both in the same document in a coherent manner. And so what happens is it opens up the possibility that some, sharp lawyer is going to say, well, we can get a dimensional variance here, although we can't get a use variance over there. And so we're asking for
Mr. Riley, could I
variance.
ask you, excuse
so
me, Mr. Riley, this is Catherine.
The
I'm
answer
just
to the
gonna-
question is,
Yes, let's
from
answer the
the
question.
Giacalone's family point of view, this is the minimum width and height driveway that they feel they need.
All right. Warren, do you have more comments? Do you feel your question was answered?
Yes, I believe it was answered. I'm not sure I understood the rationale why an existing driveway needs to be twice as big, or a new one.
Over twice as big.
Requirements of the proposal, but I do understand the counselor's position, so no other comments.
All right. Thank you, Warren. Bob Dubus, questions or comments or discussion?
Well, I have a few comments. First of all, I hate to see this planning board get taken in such a direction as you guys are going into by worrying about the house, worrying about the front of the house, worrying about the floodplain. The floodplain is there. It's all marked out. This is our purview is only the driveway. If you have a problem with the width of the driveway, that's fine. If you have a problem with them filling it, that's fine. But I don't see, I have a problem when we wander off in directions that we shouldn't be going into. There's nothing for us to deal with. The driveway marked out on the premises is a little large with the rotary, but I understand what it's for. They could do without that rotary circle and still have an adequate driveway, but they do need the driveway in front of the garage, the turnaround, and the access. So they could cut this driveway down. They could cut that circle right off of there and not have it there. I understand it's probably so when they have company or stuff that they can use that circle to go around. And if somebody has a problem with the largeness of the driveway, that's where they could cut it off. If you have a problem with the fill into the driveway, you're going to need some type of fill, whether it be 8 inches, a foot, necessarily doesn't have to be 2 foot, but I would say a foot of material under there, which would be a hardening type material, a non-asphalt material. So it would be a concrete mixture with stone would suffice under there. But I can see 8 inches to a foot to keep it stable. But I just like to see us concentrate on what we're supposed to do and not wander off. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Bob Wertschafter, questions, comments, discussion?
Yeah, first, let me say something to Bob Dubus. I recognize our limit within the planning board now, but when we put this bylaw before the town, it was very clear that there was an intention not to build in these areas. And when building was necessary, it was to raise the structures up, not to expand the size of the structures, not to put additional materials into those areas. That was the intention. That's what the town voted on. Whether we have the jurisdiction on that, I understand, but we can communicate that to the zoning board that was what our interpretation of the bylaw was. And I strongly support Catherine and Art and their comments on that. Okay. Now, Mr. Riley, could you please tell me what's happening with the existing driveway?
The existing driveway? Well, as far as I know, ultimately, it'll be, removed. Whether there's fill on it, whether there's landscape material on it or not, there's going to be a determination of the zoning board. But yeah, it's going to be it will no longer be used to go in the same direction. It will go straight down. As Mr. Dubas said, whether they get the circle or not, that's something else. But obviously, they have a 3-car garage, and they need space in front of the garage for the turnaround. So,
Now, one of the things that you did, that you said, was that there is a need to build up the property, to raise the property. Am I wrong in that you're not just raising the existing property, but you're expanding the size of the building?
oh, there's a very significant expansion in the size of the building.
Okay. Well, I think there's some issues in terms of building of that even happening in that zone. So I guess.
Well, and all those issues will be determined by the zoning board and the conservation commission.
Right. And I accept that we don't have that jurisdiction. I still don't think I approve of it. But so
no, but Bob, when you say things like that, so what's the plan for when the sea level rises? You just gonna are we tearing down the houses and just moving back? Is that what we're doing? Retreating?
No.
It doesn't give you license
Oh,
to dump.
that's the discussion we're having right now.
No,
Well,
excuse me.
And then just deal with the driveway and forget the rest of the stuff.
Okay, fine. There's a report that was done that's 20 pages long, and how come we don't have that in front of us?
We should have it, yes.
Well, I'll send it over to Ally tomorrow. I apologize. I hate to say this, but
I can't really say what the impact's going to be.
We forget that the zoning board, we forget that the planning board is going to weigh in on this stuff. I apologize for that, but it just happens. So.
Okay, well, I don't feel like I could even say yes, not having read that report.
Well,
Okay.
And candidly, after you read it, you still may say no, which is fine. But we'll send it over. If I know how to find it right this second, I'll send it over right now. But it is 20
Well,
pages.
that's not. Yes.
So.
It's not enough in advance to be adequately considered by the board, Yeah. So
well,
this is Catherine speaking.
The truth. I mean, the fact is, we're proposing a larger driveway. It's going to be shell. If the zoning board grants the variance, it will be elevated. If the zoning board doesn't grant the variance, it won't be elevated. So, I think those are sort of the two questions you have. I mean, is there really going to be an effect on the floodwaters if we have a shell drive?
Mr. Riley, this is Catherine. Thank you for your comments. Again, I just want to make some clarifications. You're bringing up a lot of issues that are, I'm afraid, clouding this issue. Whether or not the planning board, excuse me, I'm speaking.
It's only
No,
because
Mr. Riley,
our members are talking about those issues. If your members weren't talking about them, I wouldn't be mentioning them.
That's not what I'm referring to, Mr. Riley. So please let me finish. The issue is we're mentioning that it does appear from the topos that we see that the driveway, which is in the purview of the planning board, will be lifted up, which means there will need to be fill underneath the driveway. Now, this is not a dimensional variance. This is a request that something is done here that is actually in violation of our bylaw. It's not a dimensional variance. It's asking to use fill. Now, you're asking to use fill under the driveway, which is the purview of the planning board. So it's something we have to consider. If the board so, yes, excuse me, Mr. Riley, I'm still speaking. If the board so chooses to include a comment that, we find that there are actions proposed, such as elevating the driveway, which are inconsistent with the protective bylaw for the floodplain as it stands, I think the planning board is well within our purview to make those comments.
And I have no objection to that.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, I just want to move on and also hear from Roger Griffin. If you have questions or comments or discussion, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have the same kind of concerns we've all had. I guess at this point, Ally, at this point, how do we come back with some sort of feedback? How do we respond?
So Catherine, if I could,
Yes, go
at
ahead.
this point, I would say that the planning board should make, a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, what their thoughts are, what your thoughts are on the driveway. And you should make some comments if you so see fit with respect to that. So I think that's kind of the next step. That's what the zoning board of appeals will be looking for from the planning board. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, Ally and Roger, this is Catherine. If I could just interject, and I see Bob Wirtschafter may like to make a comment as well. We do need to make a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Specifically, our purview is regarding the driveway. What we need to look for, I think Ally and I have summarized. We need to assess the driveway, whether it meets the requirements of the bylaw, and that is of minimum practical width. So we need to consider the size of the proposed increase in size of the driveway. We also need to make sure that it allows for the unobstructed flow of water and that it uses pervious material. That's also something we have to look at. And then also there's the issue of the elevating the driveway using fill, which we pointed out is not consistent with the bylaw as it stands. So we need to vote to make a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we can either give a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation. We can either approve or disapprove of the proposed driveway as planned. This doesn't really address the issue that Bob Wirtschafter brought up, that there is, and I understand it's an impact report that we have not seen that would certainly include the driveway and would better inform us about our recommendation regarding the driveway. I think it is permissible of the board, although it's not strictly within our purview. I think it would be permissible to make a comment that the board has concerns, if we do, as a whole. Some board members have mentioned them, about the project as a whole, impacting the fragile coastal area of the Conservancy District and floodplain. So I don't think that would be out of line. It's not specifically our purview, but we could request that the Zoning Board of Appeals review that thoroughly. Bob Wirtschafter, I would just like to ask you more about your concerns about this report.
Well, it's a report that supposedly has information about the property and I'm not sure how I'm supposed to be able to make a judgment without a report that's dealing with the impact of construction on that property in terms of flooding and things like that. So,
all right.
I would
prefer
to have.
You would prefer to wait to make our recommendation. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if we can postpone it, that's one. I'm certainly also ready to say that there are certain components of this that are never going to be acceptable, and we could also pinpoint those out as well.
All right. Now I have two hands raised, Ally and Bob Dubus. Ally, did you want to make a comment?
I just wanted to make just a quick comment. The Zoning Board of Appeals is hearing this on Thursday, and our next meeting isn't actually until January, the beginning of January. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you. And Bob Dubus, you have your hand up as well.
I do. I think that we should note in our motion, because I think we're going to have to make one tonight, that the difference how much larger this driveway is from the original driveway, and how much the proposed plan has it, the fill line on that. And that's what I would base our yay or nay on this thing in determining it, is how much larger is the driveway and how much fill are they proposing in a non-fill area. That's how I would place our decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob Dubus. What Bob Dubus has mentioned is very specifically within the purview of the planning board. You still have your hand up, Bob Dubus. Do you have more to say?
I apologize for that. This is very new to me, raising my hand.
That's okay.
Is that better?
That's better. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna, let's see. At this point, again, if I can summarize, Warren Chain has his hand up. Warren, please go ahead.
Hold on. I would agree with the comments that Bob just made, that we should go forward with a recommendation this evening with as many comments as we can include, given that we do not have all the information that should probably have been presented to us that seems highly relevant with respect to assessing the driveway. But that said, Madam Chairman, I have a previous 6 p.m.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Training session, so I may need to abstain from the vote, but I certainly endorse any and all of the comments that are in line with what Bob has already indicated.
All right. All right. I'm just trying to think if we can formulate a vote quickly. We may not be able to formulate all the comments that go with the vote. But what I'm seeing now, if I may be so bold, is that at this point, the board would vote to not recommend the driveway as proposed, at least due to our concerns about the increase in size of the driveway, as well as the plans to elevate the driveway using fill. Arthur?
Catherine, I think that makes sense right now to do that. And I think we should add a note in there that there was some material that was not submitted along with this, which would have helped our understanding of it. And it just, as part of one of the comments to it. And perhaps what we observe is the reasons for driving the increased height, whether we want to make that comment or not. But the first part, as you stated, I'm good with that. And I would make that motion if that's helpful.
All right. Yes, and then we could potentially include Warren in the vote. So there's a motion on the floor to give a negative recommendation or to not recommend the driveway as proposed due to the increase in size, as well as the intention to elevate the driveway using fill, which is clearly inconsistent with the floodplain bylaw. Do I have a second to that motion?
Oh, Madam Chair, before you just
I'm sorry, Mr. Riley.
No, I forwarded the report to Ally, so she'll be able to pass it out.
Thank you. I received it, Catherine. I'll forward it to the board.
Thank you. But again, it's too late for we need these well in advance to consider them clearly. So do I have a second to this motion?
I'll second it, Bob Dubus.
Thank you, Bob. So let's do a roll call vote. Warren, I'm going to call on you first because you have to go.
It's Warren Chain. I approve the motion.
All right, which means you approve the negative recommendation.
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, I approve the negative recommendation.
All right. Bob Dubus.
I approve, Bob Dubus, I approve the negative response.
Okay. Thank you. Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, I also approve the negative response.
All right. And Roger Griffin.
I approve the negative, comment. Yep, I do.
Thank you. And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve that we give a negative recommendation regarding the driveway at 68 Shell Drive at this time as proposed due to the size, the great increase in size, and the intention to elevate using fill, which is prohibited in the floodplain and is inconsistent with the floodplain bylaw. I will also suggest that we add a comment that there's additional information that the board did not have at this meeting that we would like to review in case there's any additional points we want to add to this negative recommendation. Is that acceptable, Ally?
That's fine with me. I think that was in the original motion, that note.
All right.
That's what you had said, but if someone on the board disagrees with me, let me know, and then we might just have to vote that last section.
All right. I'm just going to ask the board generally, let us know if there's any disagreement with adding that last comment about the missing information. I think we're all set, Ally.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. All right. So with that being done, actually, we've covered the other agenda points. We've covered our representative to the Community Preservation Committee. We've also covered the update on long-range planning. I will at this point ask if there's anyone in the public who has any questions or who would like to make any comments about any of the items on tonight's agenda. Anyone connected to the call? I'll wait a minute or so because sometimes people are muted. All right, there being no public comment, I will, and having finished all of our agenda items, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Bob Dubus, motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Bob. May I have a second?
Art Spruce, second.
All right, thank you. So let's do a roll call vote. Art Sprue.
Art Spru, approve.
And Warren Chain has left the meeting. So Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus approves.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Wirtschafter approves.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve that we adjourn the meeting, and I will note the time is 6:03 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.